Apparently for the others it was all short.
Yeah, apparently I was supposed to make it all one, so I can break it down for you though.
Okay. Well, perhaps I could just share a little bit on some personal reflections. For example, recently I just came back from Norway and had some time with some friends. And everywhere, every time I meet someone, they say how safe Norway is for children. And that makes me think, especially in the light of this campaign, how safe is Malaysia for children? And I guess it goes back to the mindset, isn't it? How do we view children today, how valuable they are? And I think for religious communities, it's very important, and I come from the Christian tradition, and it's important for us because Jesus very clearly says that he welcomes the children. And when I was driving here, I was just reminded of a strong word from Christ, where he says that if you allow these young ones to stumble, you should wrap your neck with a stone and throw yourself into the sea. So most of us don't see Jesus in that kind of light. But obviously he had very strong words to say against people who didn't care for children or push them aside. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that within our religion and within our faith traditions, there are resources that we can tap into where religious groups, faith communities can rise up. And of course it starts with families, right? And just last week I was talking with some people in church, and we were hearing some of our children kind of giving some feedbacks, interesting words they say. For example, I want to kill myself, and you're wondering whether it's just because they're playing computer games and all that. But then if we probe deeper, some may even share that, it's because of a lot of pressure at school, maybe some forms of, some ways the school assert punishment, for example, depending on what kind of school they come from. I can speak for myself. I come from a school where caning was not just caning your hand, where I remember friends that were caned until they would walk differently after the teacher, just asserted their discipline. And this also makes me think about, recently, some of you know about this highly controversial case in Sabah, where a young person brought, pork to school, right? And then there's this debate in the papers. It's all about religion and who's this and that. But I was just wondering, how come no one asked the question, why was the child caned 10 times, or I don't know how many times? For that, why couldn't we use another way to communicate, to discipline? So perhaps this is a mindset thing. We quote verses like, spare the rod, spoil the child. And this is sometimes used to actually to hide our own anger, frustration after work. We come back, and we feel the kid is disturbing us or not doing their homework, or there may be some things going on in our children that they require us to listen. And I guess we need to really rethink about this. And I know I'm talking, as a pastor, you just can't help preaching, But seriously, I think it's important to really dig deep into our own hearts. How do we view a child? Are they just a means to an end? Or are they just, well, we just happen to have a kid,
Oops.
That kind of thing, oops. But even if it's oops, we have to take responsibility for the oops, you see. And so this is the kind of things that I think religious communities need to talk about. But the challenge is that sometimes when people look at us, religious leaders, we're supposed to have deeper voices, we're supposed to have more facial hair or whatever, or grayer hair, we're supposed to be more, but people tend to be afraid to talk about this in a church. I can speak for other religious communities, for example. So a couple of years ago, one of my church members was very aggressive after she came back from a workshop, and I think it was an NGO called Protect and Save the Children, was one of the speakers there. She was so excited, and she said, Pastor, we got to do a workshop, get everyone aware, advocate, and we did a couple of workshops to create this awareness. And even as a pastor, sometimes we can be very busy about people's sins, People are very busy sinning nowadays, right? Including myself, So we sometimes are preoccupied with a lot of other sins, and we fail to look into the mirror, and this campaign is like a mirror, to ask ourselves this question, is it abuse if there's no violence? How about verbal abuse, emotional blackmail, My parents didn't do it to me, but some parents may blackmail their kids. If you don't do this, and then I'll make your life really difficult. So no wonder some of them want to kill themselves. So I think the problems is really very messy and multifaceted. Appreciate, it's good to hear that the government today is serious with the civil society and all of us together. And I think churches, mosques, temples, and our religious leaders, we need to create a safe space where people can share. And some of the kids, they not only need a phone line, that's one, that's very important. They also need maybe someone like Zain, who's, he wears I Love KL t-shirt. I mean, how, he's safe, right? Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And or someone, we need people around us whom the children can talk to. They need someone they can go to. And now the challenge is for those of us who hear these stories, what are we going to do? And this is where it's not just the campaign, education, and a whole lot of things need to be in place. So I'm excited about this UNICEF campaign, and I really am supportive about it. And I really call upon all religious leaders, we need to be creating safe spaces for people, and especially the children. And let's face it, everyone, just go home tonight and think about maybe the last 1-2 years. Has there been anyone in your family or your friends who may have in some occasion shared at one point in their childhood they were abused? Sexually, maybe, or even in other forms defined in the broader child abuse category. And I was really surprised about family members or friends that they're just next to us, neighbors. So they're there. So we need to open our eyes, and so I guess open our ears, open our eyes, open our hearts, and then let's raise your hand. Stop child abuse now. So back to you.
Thank you very much, Sivin. I think the round of applause. You want to lead that, John? Well, thank you very much for your contributions on that. And I think you would all agree with me that a lot of the points that Sivin raised can be easily applied in a more secular environment. It doesn't need to be segregated by religious values, because at the end of the day, children are children and love is love, and we need to protect them. So thank you for that, Sivin.